the economic blockade, which does everything to inform the Iranians that they cannot survive without the big powers, without being part of the world order. They cannot do whatever they want.
Shlomo Gordon here, reporting from Jerusalem for InfoWars. I'm here with Oded Yinon. He is the man behind the Zionist plan for the Middle East. This is a translation by Israel Shachat. So, Oded, has anyone ever even tried to interview you?
No, not that I remember of. Maybe a year ago, someone from the New York Times, but she asked me why I written this article, since it might cause more anti-Semitism than they have. So I told her it's nothing to do with it. It's about the Middle East, and that was the end of the conversation. That's the only interview.
So, in your words, what is the Yinon plan? Where did it come from? How
Uh,
did it get well known? Do people know about it here in Israel? I just want to hear what you have to say.
Well, all over the world, they interpreted an article I've written. I've written such like 30, 40 years ago when I never called them the non-plan or strategic plan. I just described the realities of the Middle East as I've seen them at the end of the 70s and the 80s in the aftermath of the Camp David Accords, because I believe it's not going to be a solution that's going to be workable between Israel and the Arabs, because when you get rid of all the territory, still their basic hostility will remain. So I just look at the map, at my studies in the Middle East department here in Hebrew, and I've realized that the really deep reality is that this structure and the whole splits and the whole actual reality in which you have small elements, small ethnic groups that really, really make up the core of Middle East politics and society. There's no higher loyalties than that, whether it's pan-Arabism that was already going down, and certainly not even pan-Islam that was rising at the time. And I simply made up my mind that at the end of it, all these present 22 countries, as Sykes-Picot Agreement, are not going to hold for long, because these basic natural ethnic differences and splits and dissimilarities between all the small groups will make the Middle East look at the end very, very different. It can take 10 years, 20 years. And it so happened it started in Syria, in Yemen, in Libya. You have countries that are totally fractured, totally open, even Iraq. It can happen in Iran and Turkey, which have not just lots of minorities, the whole populations are split ethnically, religiously, to all types of Islam. The Christians are split, the Kurds are split. So, except the state of Israel, which is 80% Jewish, the rest of the Middle East is not really built up to be like a nation state, not even the Egyptians, because of other problems, domestic, economic, social problems they have. But besides that, all through the Maghreb, North Africa, and the Eastern Middle East, the countries cannot really hold for a longer period of time. And dismemberment of Syria after 2011, which was a surprise to me, to everyone, because this was a very strong, solid regime and country, shows that that's the direction where the Middle East is
Do you
going.
think that there was intervention, whether it was, there's different theories that it was the CIA or
No,
the Saudis or Qatar
I
or
think
perhaps
it's
Israel?
the basic weakness of this regime since the First World War, the basic weakness of Islam after the Ottoman Empire, the basic weakness of the Arabs' political regime, the lack of leadership, except for Jamal Abdel Nasser, but he was unique and he simply survived not more than 15, 20 years. And the Arabs have shown a disability to rule their countries, the regime they have received from the imperialists, and they have got involved in the wrong war with the wrong enemy at the wrong time, which is the state of Israel. They made 5 wars against us, they lost all of them, and they were left with nothing else, which combined their ambitions and unity together. No unity, no kind of agreement on anything, and the interesting war within the Arab countries, the civil wars today, and the wars between them, and the conflict, Saudi and Iran, Egypt and Libya, Egypt and Sudan, are so atrocious, so deep, and much more than whatever they had with Israel, which was really artificial, because Israel is so small and negligible in the whole context of the Middle East. So now, really, in 2018, we really see the realities in which the Arabs have to find their future for themselves, and they are unable to because of the differences, the splits between them. although other people think otherwise about that.
So in your opinion, Israel has nothing to do with, or maybe not Israel, but maybe America or the Gulf states. They have nothing to do with the Arab Spring. There's no foreign influence. There's no.
There is influence, but it's basically come with within. You can see it in Iran. You see in the blogs of 700,000 Iranians who want freedom, liberty. They're unable to do much more than that. And that's what's happened in the Arab world because they read English. They are part of the social networks, Facebook and the rest of it. And suddenly the whole world was open for them. The satellites, the radio, the cellulars, everyone can do Google all over and get everything done, and they can see what's true, what's false. So basic ideology is basic propaganda, which was, let's say, constant and very influential in the past, in the times of Nasser, for example. And because the euphoria of Pan-Arabism, the euphoria of Pan-Islam has died down, Iran is not a big success of a case of an Islamic revolution, and neither are the rest of the Arab world. And the splits are all over. You cannot hide it anymore. And young people tend to see the truth and tend to believe that their future is in their own hands, and that's what they look for. And they realize that the parents and the regimes are not interested in their future, but in their position and so forth. Certainly for the Palestinian, the gaps between the young and the old, the leadership and the common people are such that everyone tend to himself. Almost everyone here and abroad and all around us is alienated from the regimes all around. So Israel, therefore, since last 20, 30 years became a side issue, not the main reason for all this disruption and disturbances. It has nothing to do with it. Certainly not any agencies like Mossad, and also the United States, CIA, whatever, are always surprised by all of these events, from the Twin Towers to the split of the war in Syria, because there's no way on the ground that you can assess these things before they happen. It's in the minds of people, and they decide what to do. And even they are surprised at the success of what they did in their round at 15th of March 2011. And we all know how it's all ended for now, but this is not the end. It's just the beginning.
I see there's a lot of people in Syria. They can be Sunni, they can be Christian, they can be Alawi, that support Assad, who's an Alawi. They support him, and they even are pro Iran because they see it as a counter to ISIS, who they perceive ISIS as having been funded by and put together by, whether it was during Obama's rule, whether it was Saudi money or whether it was American money, and guidance. They see Iran as a counterbalance to that Wahhabism that almost took over the country of Syria.
Well, that's true, but that kept the unity of the Syrian regime for the 3-4 years in which ISIS existed. Now, since ISIS doesn't exist anymore, we can see again that the basic splits and the basic hatred are all over there. Assad is not really the glue that makes Syria work together. They always hated him, they always hated Alawites. He's the only ruler in the Middle East who has no allies within the Middle East, within the Arab Middle East. He just finds the Iranians who are Shiites too, like him. And Russia is an ally that can throw him to the garbage tomorrow. He's totally dependent on them. Israel threatens to eliminate his regime. Israel never talk in such terms because he's so weak dependent. Syria was a powerful country. Look what they did to us in the October 73 war in the Golan Heights. They almost decimated us. 40 years later, the army is unable to do anything. They depend on 80,000 volunteers from the Muslim Arab Legion of the Middle East, from Afghanistan, Pakistan. So that's a very sorry state of affair, very bad one. And that doesn't make the population, whoever, even Alawite Shiites, totally loyal to him because they look for the future, and the future is without Assad, and that's what's going to happen in Syria. Bayuku, Bayuku.
Your opponents claim that that you, during the years of the Cold War, you used the conflict, the larger global conflict between the U.S. and the USSR, as a cover to advance Israeli imperialism to to achieve the greater Israel. The question: many today think that Iran and China have basically are the new boogeymen for advancing. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I don't see that because if you take the case of Iran, China, and India, you see the biggest ally Iran is India, not China. Because China has its own interests, and its interests.
So Iran is a boogeyman.
Yes, but even Iran itself is so decimated, so split from within. Depends not on any real military force. Maybe it might have nuclear abilities, but on the Pasadaran revolutionaries who are totally hated by the population. And how long would such a regime exist, especially since the economic blockade does havoc with their economy and technology? And certainly I don't see Israel as the big boogeyman imperialist power that arrange it all. It all comes from the basic realities in the Middle East, which in Middle East studies, modern Middle East studies, have been totally deflected to the side because everyone really believes academically that Arab nationalism and Islamic nationalism and the rise of Islam are really the answers for the ambition of the Middle East. And most Middle East experts they did identify, especially British, Americans, and others, Arabs, Iranians, because they do have to look for some sort of ideology which will service them, will give them pride and some sort of strengthen their belief in their own identities. All these things never materialize. So even the field of Middle East studies fell to these kind of interesting wars between experts and Middle Eastern experts. It has nothing to do. Israeli ambitions have always been to defend itself, to protect itself, and thanks to the Arab failures and wars, that's why Israel became a power. But it had nothing to do with the splitting of the Middle East.
You don't think
whatsoever.
You don't think that Israel had an interest in regime changes in different places so that there would be leaders that we could make peace deals with?
No, it's contrary. Israel always had an interest since Ben Gurion, since 1948. I think for the right reasons to follow and keep cooperation, absolute total cooperation with the countries of the Middle East as they are, because the Israelis themselves were afraid that if those countries were split up, whoever will be left to make peace with. Peace is a very important Israeli principle.
And you're basically the antithesis.
Yeah, because peace is not something that you gain by yourself. Israel is too small, the Jews are too few, and even today with 10 million people in Israel and the territories, Israel cannot affect peace in the Middle East, and this never been in the Arab national agenda or on the Islamic religious agenda, so there's no reason to look for it. And that was the basic principle of Israeli policy. It failed with Egypt and Jordan and Camp David. It fell with the Palestinians in the Oslo process, and we all have seen that the Arabs and the Palestinians have no interest in any peace process whatsoever. It gained them nothing. Only Israel benefited economically, technology. Israel today is one of the biggest powers on earth, and look at the Arab countries and the Palestinian, how bad they are doing, how weak they are, how split they are. So the whole peace process failed, and today Israel doesn't follow it anymore.
You don't think that the trade with Jordan or Egypt is beneficial to the Israeli economy?
The whole trade with Arab world is less than $61 million. It's a joke. Take our trade with America, with Europe, or even with China. The Arab world is a meager zero. On the contrary, when you see our trucks going to Gaza, 1,600 each day,
Gaza,
and those trucks that going from Beit Shean to Jordan, actually we keep Jordan, the West Bank, and Gaza alive with the resuscitation from the Israeli economy. Otherwise, these countries won't exist, won't survive. At the same time, they hate us, they're hostile, and Gaza fights us every day.
If Jordan were to regarding Judea and Samaria and Gaza, I completely agree with you. But regarding Jordan, isn't it possible that if Jordan were to fall, then the Iranians would come in the same way they came into Iraq, Syria, Yemen?
Well, they haven't come yet to Syria. They have mercenaries there. They try to, but of course, Israel have said so. Netanyahu said that they will never allow it. So I don't see them coming to Jordan. And at least in Syria, they have potential allies, Shiites. In Jordan, there's not even one Shiite. So how can they walk in
Doesn't
Jordan?
it get more, because if Jordan were to look like Syria, wouldn't that make it a more tricky situation than it is today?
Yes, that's why Israel was always afraid from the breakup of Jordan. But if that happened, Israel will have to
Do what we do in Syria.
deal with the consequences with Syria, with Jordan, with Lebanon. Lebanon and Jordan right now are economically bankrupt. The economic data is horrendous because they all depend on foreign aid. And Jordan, Lebanon have each 1 million refugees from Syria and Iraq. So I don't know where these countries are going. I don't know how stable they are. There have been riots in Jordan. So I don't know how long the king can hold the thing together. But except his military power, except the loyalty of part of the population, actually Jordan today is in a different situation. And that's the future. Israel will have to deal with it. It has all the abilities to deal with it. So
Do you not see the Iranians as a real threat? I mean, it does look like they're pretty.
well, if they will
they've got
get
lots of proxies in Syria. They've got
but
Al-Sham
the
and
main
Hezbollah.
problem with Iran is its nuclear potential, which I'm not an expert on it, but if they do get there, that's a real problem. Otherwise, the wars by proxy they have in Yemen, the war of proxies they have in Sinai against the Egyptian, or the war proxy they try to do in Lebanon, Syria, doesn't get them anywhere, but it keeps the attention of the Iranians. And the Iranians hate this involvement because the Iranians have nothing to do with the world outside. They want this Iranian influence out of the Middle East, concentrating on Iran itself. And that's why Iran is not a threat as many people see it, unless it gets nuclear weapon. That changes everything. And that's why Israel so much is against it.
So, what do you think about the Iran deal and Trump exiting it?
Well, it's all a midterm, and a kind of an emergency act that ended with nothing. Trump totally never believed in it, but he used it to gain some sort of influence, and especially to renew the economic blockade, which does everything to inform the Iranians that they cannot survive without the big powers, without being part of the world order. They cannot do whatever they want. And even their terrorism in the world is not going to continue as it did before in Argentina, in Europe, and so forth. They are the bad guy of the world, and you can't fight the whole world. And as the longer that we will survive and longer the situation will go on, they'll stand against other countries. They have 13 enemies all over. They make enemies with these 13 countries all around the Middle East. And Russia is not exactly an ally. America certainly is not. And I don't think China is an ally. As I said, India is the only ally they really have. And don't forget Pakistan and Afghanistan, which are Sunnite. And who knows what would happen between Iran and those countries. So I don't look forward for Iran's future in a very positive attitude.
Well, that makes me happy to hear.
Okay.
But I see them trying to make another front on the Syrian border with the Golan, and considering that in Lebanon Hezbollah already has 150,000 rockets pointed
But
at
they
it.
haven't used them since the last war, in which, of course, everyone claimed we lost. If we lost that war, why there's been so much peace? I myself traveled on the Lebanon border at least 4 times in the last 2-3 years. They use their gardens, their farms, all the way to the last inch of the border. They build hotels. They build recreation places. I mean, the Lebanese have no interest in war, and there's nothing the Hezbollah can do about it because he gets its support from the Lebanese people. He's part of Lebanon, and that really makes him as pacific as it can. That doesn't change the hostility.
But
That
if
doesn't change
the Iranians,
the fact that the missiles and Iran is influential, but the realities are very pessimistic for them. There's very big limits to what they can do, and the behavior of Israel is not as it used to be 10, 20 years ago, and they know the damage that can be caused to them is enormous. They cannot afford to lose everything they have. Like in the Second Lebanon War, the heart of Beirut, the Dakhia, they remember that. They will never forget, certainly not Nasrallah.
so you think that the deterrence works? So is Hezbollah And you're saying Hezbollah isn't has left being a terror organization. It's now a
No,
militia.
it will always be terrorist, but it's also like Hamas, a social economic organization. But because it's part of Lebanon, because part of the parliamentary government system, because it wants eventually to rule Lebanon, it cannot go against one third of the population, which is Sunnite, another one third which is Christian, just to rely on one third which is Shiite, which doesn't support just Hezbollah supports Amal and other moderate elements. Hezbollah was always a stranger in Lebanon. It rose only because of the Israeli mistakes in handling of the Lebanon war. Israel should have been nicer and more open to the Shiite and to the Christians. Israel made its own mistakes, and that allowed for the Hezbollah to rise. But today there is no more such mistake. Israel is not inside Lebanon. Israel is not involved in any way in Lebanese affair, and that's the way it should remain. And that makes Hezbollah very, very vulnerable to internal politics, to whatever happened in Syria. God forbid, if Assad falls, what would Hezbollah do without him? So that's an example of what can really happen, which for them is very, very pessimistic. And because they know it, they are paranoid, they are behaving the way they are, and words come instead of deeds. They aren't able to do anything, and that's why they talk too much and try to scare others, because they're scared themselves.
Wow. Speaking of Lebanon, did Israel's policies have anything to do? Also, where's that picture?
So,
Is this you with Ariel Sharon?
no,
No?
I
You know
never
who
met
this
him
is?
in my life.
You know who this is?
No, probably somebody else.
Hey, what do you guys think? You think this is?
No.
According to the internet, this is you.
Yeah, well, 30
And you were
years
his foreign minister. Were you his
yeah,
foreign minister?
No,
No? You didn't advise him?
no. I never advised any government in Israel. Never been part of anything. I'm freelance all the time.
Israel ever adopt your any of your policies?
Well,
Any of
not
your
policies, but the Israeli intelligence, Amman, military intelligence, the research, Hativat HaMechkar, did adopt some of my ideas when they themselves said after the war in Lebanon, in Syria started 2011, that the Middle East might fall under a new regime of ethnic societies and tribalism and all sorts of a fracturing of the Middle East as it was before. Today, of course, the assessment have changed backward to what it was before, but for 3-4 years they did adopt some of the ideas because it looked like as if the Middle East is going to break down. Well, the breakdown, the meltdown is still in process, and now it's more stability, but this stability is not forever, so they might change their assessments again. But as a policy, Israel never adopted it because it's not part of Zionism, not part of the Israeli mentality, and most Israelis are not aware of it, and after Lebanon, that's the last thing they want to think about.
Are you saying that you're not Zionist?
I am a Zionist, but in the pure terms of Herzl, of dealing with the Israeli problem themselves, and that's what Israel has been doing under Netanyahu, not dealing anymore with the problems of the Middle East, with the peace process, and dealing with its own reconstruction, its own nation build-up. That's Zionism, nothing to do with our neighbors. There's nothing
No,
we can
no
do
interfering in foreign affairs.
Certainly, and no peace, no war whatsoever. That was
No peace,
always
no
my
war.
attitude, and I followed that. And Israel, Netanyahu follows that. Less and less aggression, less and less wars, and most of the wars have been done by other prime ministers, not by Netanyahu. He keeps the peace, and he does a very good job.
And what do you think should be done within Israel's borders in the West Bank and Gaza?
Well, you let things go as they were because simply they have no other option, and many of them will be part of Israel because under the Trump arrangement and under the Oslo agreement, besides Area C, we have really nothing to negotiate about. That's under the agreements, and that means they have nothing to give us in exchange. That's why they are those who refuse the continuation negotiation, because now it's the time where if there will be negotiation, they'll have to recognize Israel. And they're unable to do so because they have no stability, they have no real regime in the West Bank. And the regime in Gaza, Hamas, is really blowing up its own mind with...
What should Israel do in Gaza?
Well, Israel will deal with it militarily. There's no other choice because there's not going to be any kind of agreement with them.
What does militarily look like? What we're doing currently, or we're doing
Some things that might have to be developed because we cannot allow our fields to be burned forever, and we
Right.
have to adopt certainly very, very difficult military policies, and we always adapted, and we always
Would you
did.
be for taking out Hamas and retaking
I
Gaza?
don't know. After that, we'll have to take care of them. So I think they'll find a middle way. The army will always find solutions
Mhm.
how to deal with it technologically, militarily, and that might cause a lot of casualties on the other side. And that's what usually happens. They create their own graveyard. That's what they did since 1948. Nothing has changed in that.
Mhm.
No common sense and no logic whatsoever, because it's all ideology, it's all psychology, it's all, let's say, in the heart, not in the mind, and that's what we have been dealing with in the last 75 years.
So you became pretty famous outside of Israel.
Yeah.
In Israel, nobody really.
No.
In Israel, no one's really heard of you.
From Kamchatka to the Fireland in Argentina in 60 languages, everything.
People
All
tra-
reflect upon that article as this is the Zionist plan, the Israeli plan, and
Old borders, new reality.
Yes.
By Joe Klein.
And most journalists outside of Israel have seen it, read it, and they take it seriously and think this is the future of the Middle East. And they claim that I was the instigator of that policy, but it's never been a policy of anyone. It's the reality.
It's just so you simply. Well, let's look at what some of
Yeah.
what Israel Shachar says. He says.
Yeah.
He says, for example, you were against the peace agreement with Egypt,
Yeah.
and you wanted to stop it by you were saying that Israel should be for a regime change in Egypt in order to stop the peace agreement.
Well, I might have been wrong in that, but it happened anyway because there's really no peace with Egypt or with Jordan. There's such hostility between the two countries. Only the regimes cooperate. Let's remember what they did to the embassy in Cairo, to the embassy in Jordan, which means that besides getting American aid, we really received nothing. We made Israel a new country with American aid, military, economic. Look what happened in Egypt. Egypt is a bankrupt country. Of course, there was a regime change. We had nothing to do with it. Sisi came into power because the Egyptians couldn't take Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood. So certainly you don't have to intervene in that. But the same thing works for Jordan too. The change there will come from within. We have nothing to do with it. But the whole philosophy behind the peace policy is quite strange, quite unrealistic. I mean, of course, Ben Gurion wanted that, Menachem Begin, so it was good for its time, but it got us nothing done in the hearts of
It gave the
our
American
neighbors.
presidents pictures of him.
Yeah, and gave them presence in the Middle East, and the Americans are dominant all over the Middle East, and the Russians are nowhere to be found, even
Is
in
it
Russia.
possible that the peace agreements were a way of bringing the Americans
Yeah,
in more
that's why it
against
was
the
done.
Soviets?
Yes, but the Soviets were leaving anyway. The Americans wanted the position in the Middle East, and they now control most of the countries of the Middle East, and except Iran or Turkey. So the American success, like in the Cold War against the Soviet Union, is absolute and 100% proof, and it's one of the biggest successes of the American foreign policy. Camp David is part of it, but they were against Oslo because they never been interested.
Are you concerned about Iran and Turkey perhaps moving closer to each other?
Yeah, because they are the big powers in the Middle East. They are the big bullies, 80 million people, Turkey, 80 million people in Iran. But in the meantime, Erdogan is destroying the Turkish economy and making everyone else enemies of Turkey. So the good things that Kemal Atatürk did for Turkey, now Erdogan eradicates everything. So I don't know how would Turkey would survive as a big, strong power. In the meantime, Iran is economically bankrupt, and its regime is the worst thing that ever happened to Iran. And how long it would continue, I have no ideas. But of course, cooperation between these two giants is no good for anyone. But as you can see, Egypt is totally against them, and the rest of the Sunni Middle East is against them, and the big powers, Russia and America, are against them. So I have no idea where it comes from. It's from Islamic ideology, if you want, the Ottoman legacy of Turkey.
The
and
Persian Empire.
Yes, the Persian Empire, which is 3,000 years ago, Cyrus the Great. And these were not Persian, these were other people. The present people are not
Elamites.
exactly Persian, so it's mythologies and dreams and crazy ideologies which lead the leadership of these two giant countries to oblivion, and nothing good can come out of it. And in the meantime, they blame the Jews in Israel for everything that happened because it's the best thing to do. But I don't really believe that most of the people believe in it. Some do. Turkey, by the way, is the home base of modern anti-Semitism. And it's crazy because Turkey has nothing to do with Israel and the Jews, how many Jews live in Turkey. But unlike Iran, which never really been anti-Semitic, I mean, the Shiites have been anti-Jewish much more than the Sunnis, but Turkey never been anti-Jewish and anti-Semitic. But since the rise of Turkish nationalism, especially under Erdogan, Turkey is one of the worst places for the Israelis and for the Jews. Yeah.
Do you think, though, that despite the side effect of anti-Semitism, do you think that this is part of a larger return to nationalism that we're seeing all over the world?
No, it's not nationalism.
It's Islamism?
It's Islamism, the return to the Jahiliyyah like ISIS, which is barbarity. They interpret Islam any way they want. Islam is anarchy. Islam is everyone believing anything he wants. That's why so many Christians and people from Europe go to ISIS, go to the Middle East, believing that this is the new message. It's barbarism. Some people like it. Some people want it because they want action. They don't want the stability of the West. And they always like to blame the Jews, imperialism, America for everything that happened. And this is what I would call the psychological death trap of the modern world, that we have such places that offer this kind of exits, like Cuba under Castro at the time. That's what Iran, ISIS, Turkey are now for many of these modern young men and women, and that's where they lead the whole area into terrorism, into chaos, anarchy. But the big powers and the small powers around are dealing with it very beautifully, especially the United States, especially the Israelis. We know what to do about that. Yeah. And we deal with it every day. And we are quite successful. Look what happened after the Twin Towers. America was never really attacked again from outside. Look what happened in Israel after the second Intifada. Israel is much more stronger and stable today than any other time before. The problem of Gaza is a very serious problem, and it will have to be dealt in a very serious way, because the people who lead the Gaza Strip, the people who run it, are totally irresponsible, totally out of their mind, thinking that they can fight Israel forever until they bring it to the 47, 48 borders. It's never going to happen. But they don't care. They don't care about their people. They don't care about other people's children. Their children are abroad or studying in Cairo or whatever. But this is Arab politics, Arab society. I have no way to explain it. The good news is Arabs in Israel are more part of Israel than ever before. And I wish it would get bigger and bigger, and that will make Israel more peaceful from the inside. But with the Palestinians, certainly in Gaza, there are deep problems that the Palestinians are not interested to solve. And as long as this is their basic attitude, no peace is going to last with them there.
We got here an article from America. Will come the solution to the demographic problem. You want to tell us about this a bit?
Well, I think that at the end of this century, most American Jews will come here because America is changing. America was the biggest solution to the Jewish problem before Zionism, but I think today Zionism has proved itself as the only real solution. Israel, as Theodor Herzl really imagined it and envisioned it. And I think the case for American Jews, like for the rest of the world Jewry, which came over here, Israel already has 46% of world Jewry. And the basic changes socially, demographically, and mainly politically in America, the cleavage between the right and the left, are going to leave the American Jews no choice but to come here in the next 50 years.
You're saying that the extreme differences, the polarization...
Liberal, conservative. The Jews will find themselves totally not on any one side, and this is an impossible situation that will really hurt their basic security, the feeling that America is the golden Medina, the place where, like in Brooklyn, the life of their own, independently, sovereignly. I think this is all over because the next generations are going to suffer from a different political, social climate, where Jews are not accepted as they were before. The Holocaust did a lot of good in a way that it made American Jews equal to others. Well, the memories of the Holocaust are long gone. The memories of the veterans of the Second World War, we've seen the refugees after Auschwitz and so forth. And this was a psik, a nekuda in history of America and the world. And now America goes back maybe to the 30s, to the 20s. America was very strong on anti-Semitism in the times of FDR. In a way, the Second World War saved the Jews in America, but ended the lives of 6 million Jews in Europe. But the paradox here that it's coming back again very, very strongly from both left and right. And in the quench, in the squash between that, the Jews cannot survive. First of all, politically, psychologically, and that's why in the campuses in America you have this big withdrawal from Israel, from Jewish, from Zionist teams, the association with all sorts of Palestinian, Arab ideologies, ISIS and BDS, that comes with that, and that means the dismemberment of American Jewry intellectually would lead also to a lot of ramification. No Holocaust, I hope not, but certainly many of them will come here.
If you were an American living in the U.S., not disregarding anti-Semitism, etc., where would you put yourself politically? Conservative, liberal?
Nowhere, because it doesn't. I'm not an American. I grew up in America in the '60s. My father worked in the embassy there. But at that time, America was stable. America still remember the Second World War, the veterans. America had a lot of. That's on the eve of the war in Vietnam, which split America open. And America never recuperated from that. Everything they did, look, they have a president like Obama who was too much of a liberal, and he admitted he made many mistakes on his road. And you have President Trump who doesn't admit any mistakes, and he's totally to the other side.
Are you pro-Trump though? Do you think he's overall a good
in a way, I'm pro-Trump, but I was also pro-Obama because he saved the American economy and he fought ISIS as Trump does, and he killed Osama bin Laden. And outside of the United States, he made all the right decisions. Inside the United States, he was too liberal. He made the changes. He tried to make things which most Americans were against, and that led to the rise of Donald Trump. And now Donald Trump takes it to the other edge, and that's not good for America. But at least economically, financially, and at least in the relations with the world, he's on the right position.
Right.
Certainly with Israel. But domestically, it's not going to be exactly favorable to the Jews of America, to minorities, or to anyone else. So this is not the America that I've known. It's a very different America, and that's very troubling. Yes.
Interesting. And you think that also it will...
yes.
That'll be a solution here in
Israel?
Israel?
Yeah, because Mr. Herzl wasn't wrong when he said that Jews will come here. Already 50% of them did. I mean, how can he be wrong? That means that the other 50%, American Jewry, will do the same thing, not because of a fear of extinction or pogrom, because it's social, psychological, and a personal position in America will deteriorate and deteriorating right now, because its special privilege, its special position after the Holocaust is long gone. 70 years have passed away. The young generation have no knowledge of the Jews, Zionism, Israel, and it reflects in everything you can see. Even the evangelical movement. I teach evangelical in this college here in Jerusalem. Their parents were very pro-Zionist. The students are not. Even one of them told you one day that Israel has no right to exist as a Jewish state. But he made a term paper on a nation called Syria, of all countries. He says that Syria has the components of modern nationalism. Israel does not. So what can I say? If this is the basic attitudes that are emerging on campuses all over America, then there's no future for us there, the Jews, and they have nothing to look for.
Do your students ever ask you? I mean, Oded Yinon is their professor.
Because they have no knowledge, they have no idea, they've never been studying these subjects, they've never been interested. The first time they meet the Middle East is my classes, and they're 18 years old. They have no experience, no knowledge in it whatsoever, so they're young and they have no ability to deal with it. And even if you would start explaining it, it would still be very hard for them to comprehend, because it's very hard for other people, older people. All my generation is against it. All my generation think this is not something that even you should talk about, because it's so dangerous. So that leaves it to
you do talk here about a Christian Coptic state in Egypt, or Lebanon.
Well, that might be, yeah, that can happen, but that can be exaggerated, because the Copts are getting a very, very bad deal in Egypt. I don't know how much the Copts are politically strong. I met Copts Christians in America. Their headquarters is in New Jersey. I met a lot of Assyrians in Chicago, Detroit. These people are very weak, politically weak. That's why they seek the help of Israel. No one in Israel is going to help them. They think the Mossad will arrange their new statism in Syria, Lebanon, or Egypt. If they don't do these things themselves, it will never really materialize. So I don't see these things coming about. But that doesn't mean that Upper Egypt might not turn itself one day to be a kind of a Coptic Christian escapeway from the heart of Muslim Cairo, Muslim Egypt. But there's no way to see it through. In the meantime, Egypt has its own social, economic problems, and the big fight between the army and the Muslim Brotherhood, will go on.
Right, and Lebanon dissoluting into 5 provinces probably won't
Well,
happen.
it's already
When you
exists.
wrote this, Hezbollah wasn't as powerful.
Yeah, but still okay. So it seeks denomination and so forth. But there's no borders, there's no frontiers. But it's quite obvious that the Lebanon is totally divided. Each village has its own different population from another village. And Lebanon is not one country, but they learn how to survive, how to cooperate together. But that doesn't mean the civil war is over. That doesn't mean a breakup is not possible tomorrow, because everything can happen and anything would happen. So a beautiful, very, very nice country like Lebanon never really passed tragedies without suffering part of this moment, because it's part of its heritage.
You don't think that after seeing the extremism of ISIS and Al Qaeda, that we'll see more of a secular Lebanese identity or a secular Syrian identity?
Well,
or
we had
Levantine or Canaanite or
we had this
Phoenician.
we had these identities 150 years ago by Christians and some of the Muslims. I think after the British-French conquest of the Middle East, after the Sykes-Picot Agreement, this conquest by imperialism totally undertaken the rug out from all these liberal ideas for good. When Albert Hourani written about the liberal ideas in the Middle East, he reflected upon the 20s and the 30s, and that was the end of it. Since then, there haven't been any kind of liberal, constitutional, democratic, parliamentary kind of life in the Middle East. Iran was very liberal, parliamentarian at the beginning of the 20th century. It's long gone because the Shah took over in 1916, made his own dictatorship. His son took over as the Shah, a god of all Shah, and then came the Islamic Revolution. And the liberal edge, the liberal option doesn't exist anymore in the Middle East. Except in Israel, but that Israel is a different case.
You got anything else you want to add?
Oh, not really. It's
See, we have some questions.
Yeah.
Questions from the internet.
Yeah.
From
okay.
people on the internet.
Yeah.
Is Wahhabism a Jewish invention? Are the Wahhabis in Saudi clan crypto Jews?
Well, Wahhabism started 1774, even before the United States, and there were no Jews in Saudi Arabia at the time. And they were far away in Poland, so it's all magic. It's all.
Well, they claim that it was he was from the Danme Jews in Turkey, that they were followed Shabbatite Tzvi.
Yeah, I know, I understand. That's 1648. It's nothing to do with
Elders
reality.
of Zion.
Yeah, you know, it's part
It was
of all
in
this.
Iraq. It was in Iraqi military intelligence.
Yeah, so that's what Iraqis intelligentsia. I'm not surprised. These people, this is what they're thinking they have. Egyptians, officers, Jordanian officers that come to Israel once in a while. Some of them talk in the same way. They really believe in this Jewish Zionist conspiracy, and they blame everything on the Jews. Many Turkish people, Turkish high officials, really think that the origins of what happened in the breakup, which led to the breakup of the Ottoman Empire, have to do with the Jewish conspiracy, which sends a Balfour over here and send Lawrence of Arabia to dismember the Middle East, although he did help the Arabs a lot. So all these conspiracy theories are so strong, so effective, and they go to the heads of the countries.
You don't think there's a grain of truth in any of them?
There is something. Let's say, if you really think in the past, I mean, who else but the Rothschild bought the Suez Canal for the British Empire, which was led not just by Queen Victoria, but the Prime Minister who happened to be Jewish, Benjamin Disraeli. So you can connect all these things together, and then again reflect that in 1882, a few years later, Rothschild were involved in buying the lands of Palestine for the Jews. So you can say there is some kind of truth in parts of this, and I lecture about it and tell it because it's factually, it really happened. But it doesn't make it for a conspiracy, because the Jews had never any power on earth until they started building their own country. Today, Israel is a very powerful country, but until today, the Jews for 2,000 years were the most meager power that you can think of. They had no influence anywhere outside of private Jews, but as a people, look at them in Russia, look at them in Poland now, how they were, and then
Well, people say that they took over Russia with the Bolshevik Revolution.
Yeah, but then they were eliminated. It was for 5, 6 years left. Trotsky was a Jew, and the heads of the Secret Service were Jews, but they were eliminated because no one liked the Jews, and everyone realized that this is what happened. So not even one of them ever survived. But it's true. The Soviet Revolution was many of the Comintern, many of the Soviet leaders were Jews, but 5, 6 years later, Stalin finished the whole thing. So. And Jews never remained in the top. But in the Second World War, you had about 15,000 Jewish generals in the Soviet armed forces. Imagine in America, you had just one, Norman Rhodes. So that tells you something about anti-Semitism here and there.
Yeah. Are the Alawites in Syria, that's Assad's sect, are they Christian, pagan, or Shiite?
No one knows really where they're, like the Druze, no one knows where they come from, what their beliefs are, and the Shiites, otherwise are always accused by the other Muslims as pagan and sometimes as Jews. Some people says like Kardawi and Zarqawi.
Walid Jumblat probably said.
Yeah, and
it's hilarious watching Walid Jumblat and Assad accusing each other of being Zionist.
And Zarqawi, the deputy head of Qaeda in Iraq, always blamed the Alawites as being worse than the Jews and the Christians, and that was exactly the attitude of bin Laden. But certainly no one knows what their faith, their religion. It's very strange. And some of their festivals are pagan, some of their heritage is taken outside of Islam. Actually, the Shiites have split Islam 12 ways. The Sunnites have stayed, because of that split, together, the biggest church on earth. But the Shiites split into 12 different denominations, like the Protestants, if you want. And no one can understand, no one knows why they adopted this habit or that habit, but it certainly is a very strange phenomena, which make the Assad regime also very peculiar, very unique, but a side phenomenon in Middle East history for sure. Yeah. Not lasting for long, just 1 million people.
So someone asked a very general question. Do you still think it was a good idea?
About the article.
about destroying the Middle East. Anyway.
No, I mean, the article was good, but of course people interpreted it the way they wanted and found in it what they wanted. That's good too. No, that's life.
What are the borders of the land of Israel?
Well, the existing borders are enough, actually, with the high-tech world technology. Most Israelis are not interested in any more territories to the Jordan River. And I think that's what's going to happen unless there's going to be a big upheaval. The Palestinians are going to remain there because they have nowhere else to go, and they will have to adapt to the circumstances.
So Israel will annex Judea and Samaria?
No, you don't have to do anything which is legal, jurisdictional, or any kind of change like that. Because even under the Oslo agreements, you can annex, for example, Area C, but you keep it open for negotiation because of domestic political reasons. But the Arabs are not interested. They're interested in the whole land. They haven't changed a bit in their ideology since 67, 50 years ago. So there's no negotiation, no settlement. So what's the hurry to annex the West Bank?
So what do you have to say about Arab refugees from 1948 or 1947?
Well, actually, they don't exist anymore as refugees, even not in Gaza. There have been many articles about it. It's a pretension made by UNRWA, the UN, UNESCO, UNSO, and all these organizations, which make their living, their justice for their existence, raison d'etre, from the fact that they're refugees. You have today about 60 million refugees all over the world. Only 1 million of them nominally Palestinians, including third, fourth, fifth generation people who are all living quite well in America, elsewhere in Africa, in Beirut, in Amman. They have nothing to do with the refugees of the 1948 war, which number only 590,000. And most refugees today are Syrian, Lebanese, Libyans, Egyptian, and you can see the Mediterranean is full of boats sinking with these kind of refugees. And no one takes care of them. The UN has the higher council for refugees, the HCR, what's his name, and he has no budget, no one cares. 70% of the budget of UNRWA for the Palestinians come from the United States. And that's why they've survived for 70 years, seemingly
And now
as
the U.S.
refugees.
canceled. Did the U.S. cancel that?
So if they cancel it, that's a good thing.
Okay.
That would mean they'll have to adapt to reality and will have to start to work. And this status of refugees will be eradicated because it doesn't really exist anymore.
Because any other refugee is
Yeah.
their kids aren't considered refugees.
No, they are really not refugees.
All right, you have any? Boaz, you have anything we should
yeah.
add?
Maybe just to elaborate about your time in Misrad HaChutz. If
No,
any-
I just spent a few
The foreign
months in
ministry.
government. I left because they never accepted anything I've written. So I left peacefully. It was under Igal Alon, and the foreign ministry, as Yitzhak Rabin said, was a lost case. I think today they're much better. They have younger people, they have younger men and women who are doing a lot of good work, but the foreign ministry was always limited and never had really much power in Israel. I left it after 3 months. I mean,
and,
I had no choice. And also the Ministry of Information, Aaron Yariv, resigned, so I had to go to the foreign ministry, and then I started on my own. I didn't have any other choice.
so do you have anything to say to all the other people who speak about you on the internet, particularly the academics who write about you?
This is your chance to all
Particularly-
in all the 60 languages.
Particularly
you
the
can-
academics who write about you and never even sent an email.
Yeah, because they have all the right to think, to do what they like, but it shows also the standard of academics, which makes it very, very negative to think about, because people can write anything they want without responsibility, without accountability. They can interpret things any way they want. And that's the way the academic world looks. Look at the books and the articles and everything that is printed out, especially about the Palestinians. It doesn't really create real understanding. It doesn't really create real peace and good relations. And it's a very, very sorry state. And the few people who do good work, like former professor that I used to listen to his lecture, Bernard Lewis, he died a few weeks ago. Very few people like him do exist today. So, and that's a very sorry state of affairs, because politics got into this field and politics destroyed everything. And I think also today anti-Israeli, anti-Zionist, and mainly anti-Semitism is very strong in this field, and people use it. So an article like mine is like
of course,
potatoes for them.
I don't think you used this picture when you wrote the article.
No, I never written
Only
any
Israel
article.
Shachak's.
Yes, because they
Translation.
like to portray this as some sort of the Israeli state intention, which were never like that. Certainly not Menachem Begin. He really wanted peace, and he made a big mistake. Both in Lebanon, both in Egypt.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
No, I think it's...
All right, thank you very much.
Okay.